Hey there, hope all is well. Back at you with some RTD news updates. And so today's articles has a lot to do with the overall theme of, as it says here, financial warning as well as currency. So there's a lot of things happening in Europe where there could be at any moment now some type of banking collapse or central banking flaw made that can really, begin the unraveling of our current monetary system. So want to get into it. Got a couple articles here. Love to share it with you. And like always, if you find it informative, feel free to share, like, give me a thumbs up. I'd love to, hear what you guys think. Definitely hope you guys are getting a chance to get a summarized version of the news. And so here, from the Express, it says financial warnings. Italy will crash the Eurozone if nation can't take on more debt. And so this article here is a short one, but yet it's kind of, eye-catching in the fact that it says financial warning. Italy's in trouble. And so from prior news updates rather, everyone's aware for the most part that the Italian banking system, there's several banks in Italy that's basically insolvent. And so they're having a lot of, the debt's not being repaid. And so the banking sector there is struggling, and so is the country in general. And so here it's an article that has to do with the idea that right now it appears that there's a lot of Italian presidents and prime ministers meeting. It says, on some island on a boat, the French, Italian, and German leaders this week are discussing pressing issues on a boat. And so predominantly the discussion has to do with how to, keep Italy for the most part afloat in the meantime while they kind of figure out how to keep the euro together. And so it has to do with the idea that, in order for Italy to continue to basically, stay, running and stay operating, they need more debt. And so here it's about trying to find ways and trying to see which other European leaders would be okay with basically giving Italy more debt to kind of keep things float, pumping more funny money to keep the banking system together. And for the sake of, not, basically it becoming more of a problem, a lot of leaders aren't for it. And so they're trying to go back and forth or whatever to see how they can kind of work this ordeal out. And so it seemed like all the pressure falls on Angela Merkel, the Prime Minister of Germany, as to whether or not she's on board and if she was willing to support the idea of borrowing or loaning more money to Italy, pretty much knowing that it will not be repaid other than just trying to keep things afloat. So good article here. If no more debt, then no more, lifeline for the Italian banking system or country in general. And it could be one of the catalysts that brings things down. So article below if you want to find out more information. Here's another article from the Express as well, and it's also tied into the whole European crisis that's underway right now, with there being too much debt and governments pretty much for the most part, utilizing the banks to kind of support their deficits. And so here from the Express, the shocking graph that proves that Portugal is gaining on Italy in the economic doom loop. And so here it just basically talks about how Portugal is right alongside Italy, having too much debt and not being able to really service the debt anymore because, too many defaults. And so it says Italian banks have been struggling amid billions of pounds worth of bad loans, but it also heavily exposed to debt issued by the government. So essentially, weak banks and financially weak governments are dragging each other down in the so-called doom loop. And so what was amazing is this graph here shows the exposure of national banking sectors to the debt of their governments as a percentage of total assets. And so the countries that's leading the way is Spain, right here in the red. We got Portugal right here, and then we have Italy. So these three European nations here, debt is well beyond being able to be serviced, and so they're just dragging down the entire country. And this is all, the banking sector. The banking sector being insolvent, and governments, basically being supported by the banks. So everyone here is losing out. So this is the doom loop, so basically it's going to continue to increase as a percentage of total assets to debt, and it's not going to be pretty for the people who will be bailed in because of it. So it says Portugal economy is already heavily weighed down by debt at a GDP ratio of 129%. So they basically owe a lot more than they're bringing in. So just another article, definitely worth reading, just definitely worth checking out that graph to see the real state of the economy in Europe. So definitely, informative. Check it out below. Here's more news on CNBC. about the euro currency doomed unless changes made, says Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz. And so basically, here's a little short video here that summarizes the words below. But basically, what he's saying is that it's impossible for all these countries that are in trouble to really operate and basically be able to sustain themselves when they have no real control over things that they used to have as far as when they had their own currencies. And so he says, unless they put in place the kinds of institutions we have in the United States that do allow a single currency to work, they're going to face the real threat of some form of a breakup. The problem is when the euro was constructed, two important mechanisms of adjustment used when a country hits a shock. The exchange rate mechanism and the interest rates were taken away, he explained. Then instead of putting something into place, they tied the hands of the euro further by restricting the ability to use fiscal policy. And then they told the central banks to focus mainly on inflation. So basically, in other words, what he's saying is the fact that countries no longer have their own individual currencies, they all operate under one. It's the governments who all automatically run at deficits. They don't have the ability to kind of maneuver the way they used to have as far as exchange rates for their own currencies. So now they're under the they're basically dependent upon the ECB making all the monetary problem, making all the monetary policies rather for these individual countries, knowing that each country has its own problems and own ways of handling things. And so their hands are tied because they can't print money like they would normally do in their own currency if they could. So, and because of this reason, all these countries, Italy, Portugal, Spain, all the countries from the prior page are in trouble. So they're trying to find a way to borrow more money, but they only have one source to borrow from, and that's pretty much the ECB under the using the euro. So basically saying it's going to fail because everyone has problems and can't no one print but the ECB, and all these countries have to get ECB approval. So good article definitely here. Short video if you want to watch that as well. So on to the next one. Here's a interesting story out of Bitcoin.com, and we just finished up talking about the euro currency and the banking crisis in Europe, and so here we have 4 big banks to create a new Bitcoin alternative. And so there's 4 banks that's currently working on developing their own blockchain digital ledger type of technology. And it says the plan for the originally titled utility settlement coin comes from UBS, Deutsche Bank, Santander, and BNY Mellon. And so basically these companies here have begun the process of trying to implement their own blockchain technology, digital currency / cryptocurrency. And here's a quote from Hyder Jaffrey, head of the FinTech innovation at UBS, when he said, "You need a form of digital cash on the distributed ledger in order to get maximum benefit from these technologies. What that allows us to do is take away the time these processes take, such as waiting for payment to arrive. That frees up capital trapped during the process." So here it just talks about a little bit more about different banks. Goldman Sachs has L Coin, and a couple other banks here have some projects underway. So basically, because of the whole banking fiasco, they're looking for ways to basically, expand out and generate more capital by using technology for the most part. And this is a way to pretty much save their butts, but then eventually issue this in the form of a way for depositors or whatnot to invest and to save, all controlled through them. So it won't be decentralized. It'll be centralized banking in the same format that what we currently have now, where the banks will control it again. So these are all just ways that they're trying to get involved in what's going on and trying to implement as much new technology as they can prior to our monetary system having some type of unraveling. So good article if you want to read it. Articles below, bitcoin.com. On another note here, dealing with the yuan, it says China's yuan back to 5th most used world payment currency according to SWIFT. And so this article here is out of Reuters, and it basically just lays the foundation for the whole idea of the yuan, the renminbi, aka the renminbi, that's becoming a part of the basket of currencies used as world reserve currencies. And so here it talks about, just gives some statistics about how the yuan's market share increased to 1.9% in July from 1.72% in June, while the overall yuan payments have declined. Payments in all currencies fell by 10% according to the SWIFT. And it says the Chinese currency fell to the 6th place in April as volatile foreign exchange rates and China's sluggish economy dampened foreign investors' appetite for yuan assets. And so one thing that's intriguing about this article here is talks about Nearly 40% of yuan payments by South African institutions were offshore payments exchanged with countries other than China and Hong Kong. So basically, in South Africa, the yuan is being used a lot more. She said they established a clearinghouse back in 2015. So, good article to read if you're interested. It'll be included below. Here's a great article here that has to do with a little historical piece as to how we've arrived to the current system we're in and how fractional reserve banking and just basically the manipulation of monetary policy has caused, the chaos that we're currently in. And it's from Forbes Economy and the Chimera of Stable Money. And so this is by a professor of economics and finance at the International University of Geneva, Dr. Hollenbeck. And so he basically lays out a good historical aspect of, money and banking and things like that. And there's a couple things here that kind of touched on that makes sense. And he mentions how the U.S. Central Bank has essentially been following such a policy since its inception in 1913. Price stability is inscribed in this treaty here, and the goal of hitting a 2% CPI inflation target is a variant of this widely held view. It says, yet this policy has been mostly responsible for the Great Depression that started in 1929 and the Great Recession that began in 2008. It is responsible for the widening growth in income inequalities and the mass economic distortions of the last century. When you do not recognize your errors of the past, you are condemned to repeat them. And it talks about the purchasing power. The purchasing power of money is determined, like most things in a capitalist system, by supply and demand. Changes in the demand for money are caused essentially by two forces. And then right here it says the first is the subjective valuations by individuals of the value of goods and services, which is reflected in the wide array of relative prices in the capitalist economy. So basically, how people view what they consider money. And it says the second is general expansion or growth of the capitalist economy. A simple example will make this clear. Based upon supply and demand, suppose we had $10 to spend on 10 apples. Market forces normally would generate an equilibrium price of $1 per apple. If we doubled the number of apples, the individual price would fall to 50 cents, and the purchasing power of money will be have doubled. During the last 2 centuries, the growth in the output of goods and services should have led to a continuous and significant increase in the purchasing power of money, but this did not happen. So basically what he's saying is here, because of the banking model we're under a central planning model, usually when the money supply increases, the cost of goods and services should go down, but that hasn't been the case here. And because central banks policy has become the idea of fighting deflation and them having a 2% target of inflation to reach, it's the reason why the money supply must go up, and along with that, the idea of supply and demand is no longer relevant because money goes up and then prices goes up as well, which is the cause for a lot of our problems here. And so he goes on to talk about how, it says here, the economy gains nothing directly from the change in the supply of money. And then he talks about on the next page here how there's 3 ways the money comes into existence. It's either, mined in the form of gold and silver, or 2, central planning and fractional reserve banking created our credit, or 3, governments, selling bonds or monetizing debt in the form of a counterfeiting type of measure. And then he ultimately leads with the idea that a way to kind of get away from that, because the chance of us going back to a gold standard is not likely. And so he's for the concept of a crypto-based currency that is out of the hands of government and out of the hands of central banking institutions, so that it's a evenly spread out money supply that's capped at a certain rate, and he kind of feels that would help kind of balance things out. So he's seems to be a proponent of central currency, just because of the fact that we will not be going back to a gold standard, or able to rather, under this new the next monetary system that we enter in. So definitely good article here. There's a lot more detail that goes on, so I don't want to keep this too long, but worth checking out if you're interested. Here's the last article here, and it's from Sovereign Man, and it's entitled "Barack Obama May Have Finally Destroyed America's #1 Advantage." And so it's a little bit of a lengthy article here, but it basically talks about, and it describes from 1944 until today, because of, the implementation after Bretton Woods of the dollar as a primary source of world, of currency. Every country around the world since that time has kind of been forced into using the dollar when it comes to government transactions, as well as, commercial bank transactions. all centered back towards Wall Street. And he actually lists out the process of how every bank must have an account with a like a middleman type bank, which is located in Wall Street. So basically, if you want to get money from Australia to, Japan, even though they're a lot closer, you should be able to just send it directly to it. Unfortunately, you'd have to send it to New York, and then from New York to the in destination country. And so basically, he's saying that because of the manipulation of the United States and abusing its privilege as world reserve currency over the last 8 years under the Barack Obama regime, that banks now have realized that the United States has become more of a monetary terrorist as far as enforcing all types of fines on banks and countries for not going along with the plans that the United States try to implement in the financial sector. So basically what he's saying is banks now have pretty much started to wean themselves off of using the dollar and no longer dependent upon the SWIFT system to transport money. And so it talks about how China has really, stepped up its efforts with its new financial infrastructure called China International Payment System, or CIPS, or CHIPS as they may say. And so basically here it talks about the idea that another cryptocurrency-based, blockchain style protocol called Ripple has began being a way of transferring directly in between countries. And so he talks about how just recently Canada has directly sent money to another country in Europe. And so that has kind of gone or bypassed the use of the banking system to get dollars and forth, back and forth. So he's saying that this technology is becoming more popular. More banks are signing on. So he's kind of saying that in the next year or so, you'll see a lot more banks deciding to do transactions directly, cutting out the middleman, which is Wall Street and the SWIFT system in general. So good article here if you want to read it. He does a good job of putting together some historical pieces prior to getting to this point. So definitely worth your while. So this is kind of a long, lengthy news update, but I hope you enjoyed it. Definitely share your comments. I would love to hear what you guys think. And also share it and give me a thumbs up. And I want to try to get more people out here interested in the main alternative media news rather. So looking forward to bringing you more news updates. Until later.